When I opened the email, I thought it was a joke. My son in law had sent me an invoice, a list of every expense he claimed I owed them $96,000. The woman I raised for 28 years was copied in the mail. My own daughter. That's when I realized love has a price tag only for those who never knew love. But let me start from the beginning because this story didn't begin with betrayal. It began with hope, with sacrifice, with the kind of blind, unconditional love that only a mother can give. My name is Alina Mitchell. I'm 63 years old now, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 35 years shaping young minds and wiping away tears. I live in a modest two-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same house where I raised my daughter Sophie after my husband James died 12 years ago. James was my everything. We met in college, married young, and built a life together that wasn't extravagant but was filled with warmth. When he passed away from a sudden heart attack at 51, I thought my world had ended. But I had Sophie, my beautiful, bright-eyed daughter who was only 16 at the time, and I made a promise to James as I stood over his grave. I would give Sophie everything. I would make sure she never felt the absence of her father. I would be both mother and father to her. Sophie grew up to be everything I hoped for. Smart, ambitious, kind. She graduated college with honors, got a job at a marketing firm, and seemed destined for success. And then, 3 years after graduation, she met David Richardson. Tall, charming, always dressed in expensive clothes that seemed just slightly out of place with his income level. He worked in sales, he said, but the details were always vague. Big deals in the pipeline, he'd say with a confident smile. Just waiting for them to close. Sophie was smitten. And I wanted to be happy for her. I wanted to believe that this smooth-talking man with the perfect hair and the persuasive words would take care of my daughter the way James had taken care of me. They got married on a beautiful spring day. I paid for most of the wedding, $20,000 I had saved from my teacher's pension. David's family contributed almost nothing, citing hard times. But I didn't mind. This was my daughter's special day. This was the moment she would start her own family. I gave a tearful speech at the reception about how proud James would have been, how Sophie had grown into a remarkable woman, how David was now part of our family. I meant every word, I truly did. I didn't know was that family to David meant something very different than it did to me. The first time they asked for help was 3 months after the wedding. They called me together, Sophie's voice shaky, David's voice calm and measured. Mom, we're having trouble making rent this month. David's big commission got delayed, and my salary just isn't enough to cover everything. Could you possibly help us out just this once? We'll pay you back as soon as David's deal closes. I didn't even hesitate. Of course I would help, that's what mothers do. I sent them $800, their monthly rent for a nice one-bedroom apartment in the city. Don't worry about paying me back, I told them. Family doesn't keep tabs. David thanked me profusely. Sophie cried with relief. I hung up the phone feeling like I had done my duty as a mother. The next month, they called again. Same story. David's commission was delayed. Unexpected expenses had come up. Could I help with rent again? Just this once, just until things stabilized. I sent the money, and the month after that, and the month after that. 1 month turned into 6 months. 6 months turned into a year, and before I knew it, I had been paying my daughter's rent for 2 years. $800 a month, every month, without fail. I started cutting back on my own expenses. I canceled my small gym membership. I stopped going out to dinner with my friends. I bought generic brands at the grocery store instead of the names I preferred. I told myself it was temporary. They were young, they were struggling. This was just until they got on their feet. But here's the thing about enabling, it never stops. The more you give, the more people expect. And the more they expect, the less they appreciate. By year 3, Sophie stopped calling to ask for the rent money. She just sent me her landlord's information and I paid directly. It became routine, expected. An obligation rather than a gift. And when I finally worked up the courage to suggest that maybe, perhaps, they could start contributing more to their own rent, David's response was swift and cutting. You know how hard it is out there, Mom. Do you want Sophie to live on the street? Is that what you want? The way he said Mom made my stomach turn. It wasn't affectionate, it was possessive. Transactional? I started noticing things. Small things at first, then larger ones. David would post photos on social media from expensive restaurants. Sophie would show up at my house wearing new designer handbags. They took a vacation to Mexico, a much-needed break from the stress, David explained when I asked how they could afford it. We got a great deal, he said dismissively, but I knew. I knew because I was the one making their rent payment while they were sipping margaritas on a beach. My friends started asking questions. Alina, why are you still paying for them? They're in their 30s now, they both have jobs. I defended them every single time. They're just struggling young people, the economy is tough, it's fine, I'm happy to help. But the truth was I wasn't happy, I was exhausted, I was resentful, and I was starting to feel used. By year 7, my own financial situation was becoming precarious. My pension was modest. I had some savings, but they were dwindling. I needed new tires for my car, but kept putting it off. My roof started leaking, but I patched it with tape and buckets rather than calling a repairman. Meanwhile, David bought a motorcycle. A motorcycle. When I gently mentioned that perhaps if they could afford a motorcycle, they could start taking over their rent payments, David's response was cold. That was a gift from my parents, Mom. You can't expect us to sell a gift. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say that I had been giving them gifts, $800 worth of gifts every single month for 7 years. $67,000 in gifts, but I stayed quiet because that's what I always did. Year 8 brought a new challenge. I started experiencing pain in my hands, arthritis, the doctor said. It would get worse with time. I might need surgery eventually. My health insurance was decent, but there would still be significant out of pocket costs. I needed to start saving. I needed to put myself first for once. So I called Sophie and David and asked them to come over. I made tea. I tried to make the conversation gentle. I love you both so much, you know that, but I've been paying your rent for 8 years now and I need to start thinking about my own future. My health isn't what it used to be. I need to save for medical expenses. I think it's time for you two to take over your own rent completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie looked down at her tea. David's jaw tightened. And then he spoke, his voice dripping with barely concealed anger. After everything we've done for you, after all the times we've been there for you, after all the emotional support we've provided, you're just going to abandon us now? We're family, Mom. You can't just stop now. I was stunned. What had they done for me? What emotional support? They visited maybe once a month, stayed for an hour, usually to ask for something or tell me about their lives. They never asked about mine. They never noticed that I was wearing the same 3 outfits on rotation because I couldn't afford new clothes. They never saw the buckets catching water from my leaking roof. They never asked if I was okay, but I backed down because that's what I always did. Okay, I said quietly. I'll keep helping, just let's talk about a plan for you to transition to paying it yourselves within the next year. David nodded curtly. Sophie still wouldn't meet my eyes. They left shortly after. I sat in my kitchen alone, staring at the cold tea, and wondered when I had stopped being a mother and started being a checkbook. A week later, the email arrived. I was sitting at my computer, checking my messages before bed when I saw it. Subject line: Invoice for services and emotional distress. From David Richardson. I opened it, thinking maybe it was spam or a joke, but no, it was real. It was a detailed spreadsheet. Every month for the past 10 years was listed. Rent payments, $96,000, but that wasn't all. There were additional line items. Emotional labor for providing companionship to Alina Mitchell, $500 per month for 10 years equals $60,000. Time spent visiting and maintaining family relationship, $200 per visit, approximately 120 visits equals $24,000. Stress and emotional distress caused by Alina's decision to cease financial support, $10,000. The total at the bottom in bold red letters was $190,000. Underneath in smaller text, payment plans available. Please remit payment within 30 days to avoid legal action. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of sick joke. But then I saw it. Sophie was CC'd on the email. My daughter, my only child. The girl I had raised alone after her father died. The girl I had sacrificed everything for. She knew about this. She had seen this invoice, and she hadn't stopped him. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. I called Sophie immediately, my fingers trembling so badly I could barely dial. She answered on the third ring. Mom, I was going to call you about that. What is this? My voice was barely above a whisper. What is this invoice? David just wants fairness, Mom. You helped us. Now it's time to settle things properly? Settle things properly. Those words echoed in my head for hours after I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past 10 years, every sacrifice I had made, every time I had put their needs above my own, every time I had defended them to my friends who warned me I was being used. And I realized something that broke my heart. My daughter didn't see me as a mother anymore. She saw me as a resource, a bank, an obligation. And David? David saw me as someone to exploit until there was nothing left to take. There's a moment when you stop being a parent and start being a wallet, and by the time you notice, it's already too late. The next morning, I called my friend Helen. Helen was a retired lawyer, sharp as a tack, and one of the few people who had consistently told me I needed to set boundaries with Sophie and David. I told her everything. I forwarded her the email. She was silent for a long moment, and then she said something I'll never forget. Alina, this is financial abuse, and it's time to fight back. 2 days later, Helen and I drove to Sophie and David's apartment. I had printed out the invoice. Helen had prepared a legal document. We knocked on the door. David answered, looking annoyed to see us. Mom, this really isn't a good time. We need to talk now, I said, my voice steadier than I had expected. We sat at their kitchen table, the same table I had helped them buy 3 years ago. I placed the printed invoice on the table. You sent me this as a debt, so let's treat it legally then. Helen leaned forward, her voice calm and professional. Mr. Richardson, I've reviewed this invoice you sent to Alina. Need to inform you that every payment Alina made to you over the past 10 years was legally classified as a gift. Gifts are not loans. They cannot be repaid or invoiced. There is no legal ground for you to demand repayment, and any attempt to pursue this through legal channels will result in a countersuit for harassment and attempted fraud. The color drained from David's face. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Then he tried a different tactic, manipulation. Mom, you're misunderstanding. It's just symbolic. We wanted you to see how much we depended on you. We wanted you to understand the value of what you were giving us. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years, and I saw him clearly. He wasn't charming, he was calculating, he wasn't struggling, he was entitled, and he had been using me from day one. I turned to Sophie, who was crying silently at the table. Sophie, do you agree with this? Do you think I owe you money? She wouldn't look at me. I don't know, Mom, David says. I'm not asking what David says, I'm asking what you think. She finally met my eyes, and what I saw there broke my heart. Confusion, shame, but also resentment. You always made it seem like helping us was easy for you, like it didn't cost you anything. Maybe you should understand what it cost us to depend on you? I stood up slowly. Helen stood with me. I'm done, I said quietly. I'm done paying your rent. I'm done sacrificing my own well-being for your comfort. I'm done being treated like a bank instead of a mother. Dependence isn't love, David. It's addiction to someone else's sacrifice. We walked out. I didn't look back. The next few months were the hardest of my life. Sophie stopped calling. David blocked me on social media. My friends rallied around me, but the loneliness was crushing. I had spent 10 years making Sophie and David the center of my world, and now there was just emptiness. But slowly, gradually, I started to heal. I joined a community gardening group. I started taking watercolor painting classes at the local senior center. I got my roof fixed. I bought myself new clothes. I started putting money into savings again. 6 months after our confrontation, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten from Sophie. My hands shook as I opened it. Mom, David left me. He found someone else, someone whose parents have money. I'm broke. I'm alone. And I'm so ashamed. You were right about everything. I let greed and comfort blind me. I let him manipulate me into seeing you as an obligation instead of a blessing. I thought love meant giving, but I forgot to give back. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to help me. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm sorry. I cried reading that letter. Not tears of anger, but tears of relief. My daughter was still in there. Buried under years of entitlement and manipulation, but still there? I called her the next day. We met at a small coffee shop halfway between our homes. She looked thin, tired, older than her 32 years. She had moved back in with a roommate, was working extra hours, was struggling. And for the first time in years, she wasn't asking me for money. She was just asking for forgiveness. We talked for 3 hours. I told her everything, how much I had sacrificed, how invisible I had felt, how much it had hurt to be treated like a transaction. She listened, really listened, and she apologized over and over. I'll help you rebuild, I told her finally. But not by paying your rent, not by enabling you. I'll help you by teaching you how to stand on your own. Together, we looked at her budget. We found her a smaller, cheaper apartment. I helped her move in, but I didn't pay for it. She did. We set up a plan for her to pay off her debts. I offered advice, support, encouragement, but not money. It's been 2 years now. Sophie is thriving. She got a promotion at work. She's dating someone new, someone kind, someone who works hard, someone who respects her independence. We have coffee every Sunday, real conversations. She asks about my life. She notices when I get a haircut. She thanks me for the lessons I taught her, both the intentional ones and the painful ones. Our relationship isn't what it was before. It's better. It's honest. It's equal. And David? I heard through mutual friends that his new relationship fell apart when her parents refused to support them financially. He's moved on to someone else now, still looking for the next person to exploit. When you give too much, people stop seeing your heart and start counting your money. Real love doesn't demand repayment, and real parents don't owe adulthood to their children. I didn't lose my daughter. I just finally taught her to live. I taught her that dependence isn't love, that sacrifice must be mutual, that family isn't about transactions. And I taught myself something too, that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary, that saying no doesn't make you a bad mother, it makes you a whole person, that you can't pour from an empty cup and martyrdom helps no one. I'm 65 now, my arthritis is manageable, my roof doesn't leak anymore, I have savings. I take painting classes and tend to my garden and have coffee with my daughter every Sunday. And when young mothers ask me for advice about helping their adult children, I tell them this: help them learn to fish, don't just give them fish. Teach them resilience, not dependence. Love them enough to let them struggle. Because the greatest gift you can give your children isn't money, it's the belief that they're capable of taking care of themselves. That's the lesson I wish I had learned earlier. But I'm grateful I learned it at all. Because now, finally, after 63 years of living, I've learned something essential. You can't save someone who doesn't want to save themselves. And you can't love someone into loving you back. Real love is reciprocal. Real family is mutual. And real healing begins the moment you stop sacrificing yourself for people who see you as expendable.